The doors are closed and we are back from yet another invigorating break. I hope all of you are having a good time. I hope it's actually gonna get better now, because we are about to start the second Expert Insights session of the day. This one is on the theme of business development, licensing and partnering with a Nordic outlook. And I'm thrilled and proud to be able to present not only one, but two major pharmaceutical companies from the region. We have Novo Nordisk with Anu Balendran, and we also have Tara Heitner from Ferring Pharmaceuticals. A warm welcome to them. And I should also say that Anu, your titles are very long. Anu, Senior Licensing Director, Global Business Development with Novo Nordisk, and Tara, Head of Global Search and Alliance Management from Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Could you each give us a short summary of your background in BD and perhaps tell us a little bit about your current roles? We can start with the ladies.
Thank you, Jonas. Well, my background, I'm a scientist by training, and I worked for the first half of my career as a bench scientist doing drug discovery and development. But I very quickly started my entrepreneur career with the first spin out from MIT, where I was a scientist. And then when I moved to Denmark, the founding of a biotech startup where I was also a scientist. When the company was ready for commercialization, I took on the BD role, and I did an MBA at DTU. And from then on, I have been working as a consultant in my own firm for many companies in the region, both Sweden, Denmark, as well as in the rest of Europe. More recently, I was consulting for Merck, German Merck, and for many startups in the region. And I've been CEO of 3 companies, 2 of which I founded or co-founded, and a Swedish company here in the region. So my experience in BD comes from both working as Director of Business Development in multiple startups and as CEO for some early stage companies.
Great, thank you very much. And your current role at Ferring Pharmaceuticals, you're actually quite new at that role, is that correct?
Yes, I started at Ferring about 2 months ago, and now embarking on something new because I'm actually looking for opportunities and managing opportunities in the commercial, so drugs that are on the market or close to the market, and in new therapeutic areas as well.
Okay.
Very exciting.
Cool, thank you. Anu, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Novo.
Thanks, Jan, it's great being here. I'm also a scientist by training, and me and Tara were just comparing notes before I started, after my PhD, straight into a pharmaceutical company. I joined AstraZeneca up in Gothenburg and been with AZ almost 17 years. As a bench scientist through the drug discovery process, leading projects into clinic, and also then moving into business development in AstraZeneca, so learning the ropes within the big pharma environment. And you know, these big companies do have lots of opportunities for you to try out different things. Then I stayed in BD with them for quite a while, and then with Alligator for 2 years. So some experience of working in the small biotech environment, a real kind of eye-opener for me, taught me a lot. And then back into Novo, I joined Novo 3 years ago. And in my current role, I'm part of a small group, about 10, 12 people within global business development in Novo, who are responsible for the transaction part. So very much how to structure a collaboration, a deal with an external partner, the agreements, the valuation, and then negotiation and completion of those deals. So we kind of don't go and search. There's great teams in Novo who do that, but more execute these agreements. And I've been doing that for 3 years. But my basis is science, so I really enjoy looking at the scientific part of these collaborations.
That's great. Since you have your scientist backgrounds, and do you have a specific favorite therapeutic area that you both are especially keen on, or are you agnostic, so to speak, in your roles currently? Anu, for example.
So personally, I did my PhD on insulin signaling. And to work for Novo as an insulin company, diabetes is my kind of my favorite area, I think. However, when it comes to Novo Nordisk as a company, I mean, of course, we are in the news today. Our history is diabetes and obesity. Still, it's very much our core therapeutic area, so we're really out looking for partnerships in those two areas. So, but however, Novo is also expanding its portfolio of projects to adjacencies to diabetes and obesity. So we're looking at cardiovascular disease. You will see some of the deals we've done around that. You'll see in our partnering page, we're keen on new cardiovascular opportunities. We're also looking at some NASH and also chronic kidney disease. Novo has a legacy in rare blood disorders and rare endocrine disorders, and we still continue to give focus to programs in rare blood disorders. For last year, we acquired a company in sickle cell disease, so we are keen to move therapies in rare blood disorders and also some rare endocrine disorders.
And what about you, Tara? Do you have a favorite area that you are?
That's a very tricky question. Diseases are very difficult to have favorites for, as you know.
Maybe it's a poor choice of words.
But I've worked in my career, because of my consultancy company, I've worked across indications, therapeutic areas, and modalities. But where I focused the most has been in autoimmune diseases and inflammation. And as most of you probably know who work in science, most diseases, there is always an underpinning of the immune system in almost all diseases, including diabetes. So that, this is, I really, from a scientific perspective, if I could do it all over again, I would not have done a PhD in chemistry, I would have done a PhD in immunology.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And this is a broad question, but I would like you to try to narrow it down to one specific answer, if possible. Do you have any personal reflections on current business development trends or licensing trends? Is there anything in particular that you could put your finger on? If I start with you, Anu.
I believe there's an increase in focus in therapy areas of interest to Novo, in the metabolic space. It's been a neglected space in investment for a long time, but given the excitement and the success that's been shown, we can see an increase in interest from investors and so forth in going into that space.
Is that something you share, or do you have any other reflections on that?
Well, I think there's a very interesting trend towards personalized medicine, and I think even though I've been a very short time at Ferring, there seems to be an interest in going in that direction, even for fertility and women's health. Also, the trend towards point of care, home care, hospital home care, so that you can take the patient out of the clinic, out of the hospital, and treat them at home with advanced devices and apps to monitor, to do test blood, and to even look at the status of the ovaries and whether the fertility drugs are working and when to stimulate. So now that I've joined Ferring, I've really seen that there is an underrepresentation, underfunding of women's health, and of really underrepresentation of scientific understanding about fertility. So I think that's a real strong new passion of mine.
And then representing two, truly global players, do you still think that your respective companies, being here in the region with their headquarters and so on, have a especially keen eye on the Nordic scene, so to speak, specifically Swedish or Danish companies, when you look to what you could acquire or find next? Tara.
Well, obviously in the Nordics, there's extremely good science, and I think at Ferring we have a collaboration with several early academic groups, including Karolinska. So indeed, we are looking to the Nordics. We also have a collaboration with the BII Institute in Denmark. So there is a clear value of the research and the science that's going on in the Nordics.
And what's the Novo Nordisk take on that?
I mean, very much like what Tara's been saying. I think, you know, I'd like to add on to say, like, if you take a company like Novo, I think it's a duty of us to look globally. So we do look globally. That's part of the game. And it's important that companies in the Nordics are competing globally. And I know you guys see the world as your partnering opportunity. But being close to home here in the Copenhagen area, of course, we have an increased chance of interacting with the companies in the region and following them a bit more closely. And as Tara mentioned, like the BII in Denmark, we do work closely with the academic groups here across the region, and that gives us a bit more, maybe a step forward in the relationship in the area to develop those into partnerships.
I should also mention that I can see that here in the question app there are some questions coming in, and that's great. I would just say that encourage everyone to write whatever questions you might have for these giants on stage, and I will be happy to relay them when we are done. So looking at different assets or different potential assets, what's the most attractive thing that you look at when you assess a potential target? Tara.
Well, Ferring has a cultural focus on putting people first. So the patient really comes first. And because our main focus is on fertility and maternal health, we're definitely focused on any technologies that will complement our current approaches and allow us to reach a larger market.
Yeah. And what do you have your focus on when you explore?
So I'm going to stretch the question a bit, Jonas, and give you a little bit of feel for how we do evaluations in Novo. Maybe that's
please do.
Answers the question a bit more. So I think spoke about the disease areas of focus, and then comes from how we approach partnering and how we look at external partnerships. We have a really close team within global business development at Novo Nordisk, and we start with our strategy. So what we are out looking for has a strategic link to within our company and the different therapeutic areas within our company. They are in close connection with those leaders in those therapeutic areas to understand where is the gap. Because please understand, we also have a very strong internal R&D engine, which is also producing drugs for us. So we need to fit it in. So based on those strategies, we're going out and looking for programs, and that can be at different stages, and that will determine what we want in those programs. What we're looking for, I mean, maybe it's a cliche, but it's true. We're looking for pharmacology across. So, you know, there's got to be a clear focus on what it brings as a differentiating feature to the unmet medical need. As Tara was saying, the focus on patients, making a difference to patients, that has to be there for why you're doing that. Then comes exactly the whole aspect of the quality determined on where you are in the stage. We're looking for that, you know, programs that will be easier for us to integrate into our pipeline. And that means you've kind of done the whole package to a pharmacology. It might be more expensive, a bit more extensive work in safety and all the other aspects, but that's what we will look for in everything, and quite detailed diligence going through the process. So our teams are doing through evaluation and then going through diligence in detail, and it can be across multiple parameters that makes a click.
And we're actually going to dive into the pricing or value part of it also in a little while. But seeing them, are there any obvious red flags, so to speak, that would immediately disqualify a small company from potential partnerships? I mean, perhaps the due diligence team should be here to answer that, but I'm sure you have your ideas about what could be a possible no-go zone, so to speak. If I start with you, Tara.
Well, as a scientist or former scientist, data is king. And so strong scientific package, good clinical data, strongly powered clinical trials with clear endpoints that are meaningful. that are well recognized by the KOLs. That'll be important. For us, of course, it has to meet our strategic areas of focus for Ferring, and support our global strategy. We have a global footprint, and we're looking at assets not just for the U.S. market, but across the globe, both in Asia and South America and Africa as well as Canada. So a no-go would be, for example, poor patent situation, short exclusivity period, or poor data package that's not supported.
Is there anything you might add, Anu, to that?
I think you've covered some of the key aspects when it comes to patent and so forth. You couldn't pinpoint to one. I think in a due diligence, I've led so many, you can fall at any point, And I think that's the important part for us, to turn every stone and understand the full data package. What is important, as Tara was saying, is a good, strong scientific data package that is significant and that can support the rationale for developing that drug.
And both of you have also background in working with smaller companies and sort of being on the other side of that table during BD discussions, I guess. So is there anything that you have learned now in the big pharma environment that you wish you had known before when you were at a smaller company? Tara?
There's a lot of things I wish I would have known. But I think that it's been difficult when you were a smaller company to really be able to deliver everything. Pharma companies will always say, we want more data, we want more data, we want more data. So the key is to be able to tell the story with strong but limited data. You can only generate so much as a small company. You can't run the same clinical trial as a big pharma, but it's important to run a good, solid clinical trial, even though you may not have the right funding. And you can support your clinical data with external data from other parties. So for example, pharma would, if you say you have a novel target, that's great. But pharma will often not want to partner just because you have a novel target. They want to see that that target is validated by other people, other pharmaceutical companies that might be following the target, or other well-established academic groups that are publishing around the target. So if you have a novel target, make sure that other people think it's novel as well.
Is that a little bit about following the herd mentality then?
You want to be competitive, but not too unique.
Anu?
I mean, I think I went from having spent 17 years plus at AZ to a small biotech, and I would think, starting there, people at Alligator at that time would have said, God, this guy wants everything under the sun, which was true, as just Tara says. I think from a big pharma perspective, there is a real wish for a big data package. They really want to see these projects coming to the pipeline with the same level of scrutiny and data as they would do for their own programs. And that's natural. And I think it's important here to really focus on the key elements and create that right value out of this package, which in a lot of companies, for me, one thing is it's going to cost more than you think. You can't do things on the cheap. That's, I have to be honest, is you got to make sure you can focus your investments in the company to get to the full package. And you cut short, you're going to suffer when you're showing that data package in a deal diligence. So it's really important to think way ahead of you coming to a point where you say, I want a licensing partner, that you've thought through what would the licensing partner want in this package of data, and make sure you're creating that full chain there and creating the value out of it.
Mm. And you touched upon the cost side of it, and that's pretty much in focus now for many, many small companies, obviously seen as it's tough to raise capital. Would you say that in general, the current market climate then with tough to get capital, and is that driving more deals, BD deals or licensing deals or acquisitions because of lower valuations and the perhaps more desperate feeling about small companies that they need to get some kind of funding? Would you say that, Tara?
I think there are definitely more programs out there available for partnering, but because of the lack of funding, pharma companies also have a lot more scrutiny because the data isn't there because the company haven't been funded enough. So while there are many projects out there, they maybe lack the data packages that we would seek in a pharma company to in-license. It doesn't mean we wouldn't follow them to see if that could be done, or be creative around some kind of research collaboration to see the data package be completed through that type of collaboration. So I think you have to be creative in these days on how to get the data needed.
It's a bargain price tag. Is that even an issue for a big pharma company, really?
I think, yeah, I mean, you would think so, but from where we stand, where we find a program that is interesting and attractive to us, it's also something that's good and has a value. Then you are going to pay the value. And it's not, of course, there is maybe more of a press for partnering compared to maybe a time when you can raise capital and keep it going for longer. So they'll partner earlier. But I think we will pay the value that it demands because of the quality and the innovation in it. And it's not purely market driven. So the market has some play, but I think we are in our own cycles where we are keen to do a deal or have a strategic outlook to do deals. Then I think pharma companies are stepping in. I mean, you're not seeing on a global scale. Yeah, there are deals happening, but there's also big price tags. I can't say from looking at it that I'm seeing a massive depreciation in the price tag for this. I think they all drive a certain value based on the quality where they have gone and maybe the demand for that from several partners. That'll drive the price.
Well, that's really interesting, and it's actually leading into my next question. That what are the driving factors behind the different price tags? I mean, obviously you have patient population and stuff like that, market potential. But what's the huge difference that makes, for example, Roche pay $7.1 billion for Televant when they buy them, and another company gets a 300 million upfront, and then perhaps a smaller company gets only 30 million upfront. I mean, there's huge differences there. Is it all data driven, you think? Anu?
I think what you will see when you look at these price tags, there is a correlation to how late stage it is, and also linked to how big a market potential it has. So there is, I mean, all of our peers, and including us, are doing diligent financial modeling to put a valuation on these programs. So that I think is probably a large part of how the pricing is based on the programs. But there is, and the other element of it as well is, novelty. Maybe there's a premium paid for that. I mean, you're first in class or, so forth. Then there's competition as well. If there is a true competition for a certain asset, then of course that can also have an influence on the price. But most of it is driven by the potential it presents and how the team can justify that.
So, as we were saying here, the bargain price tag might not be a game changer for a company of the size of Novo or Ferring to do an acquisition or not, but everyone loves a bargain. So do you think that the current market climate can make even the companies that have something that's desirable from a big pharma's perspective to be, more vulnerable in the negotiation situation regarding how much they can get paid? Do you think so, there?
I think it's important to know the value of your asset, even in the market we're in today. It's important to build relationships with the company that you're partnering with and not expect you're going to make a deal in a month or two. It takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months. During that time, you build a relationship. In the company you speak to, you should have an internal champion. That's important in terms of you're not negotiating for the cheapest deal. You're negotiating for a long-term relationship. And if you have finances that don't support a longer-term relationship, then the alliance will not be a success. And I also agree that you want to have a competitive process. So ideally, more than one company is bidding for your asset, and that's an important aspect in the process.
That's a dream scenario, I guess, to have many bidders. Well, what would be your best advice then to a smaller company looking for a license deal or to even be acquired at some point? How do you maximize attraction from companies like yours?
I think it's important to start the partnering process and engaging with pharma companies early to learn what it is they expect. And before you actually make the clinical trial design final, make sure that you're aligning with what the market expectations are for what the clinical trial should be, what the endpoint should be, how it should be powered. And then make sure that you engage continuously along the way with all the partners so that you build this relationship and engage with them. When you're ready to make the deal, you will already have engaged people who are willing to hear about your program.
And given the magnitude of the the global market and so many projects out there, can you get the big pharma's attention at that an early point? What do you say, Anu?
Adding on to Tara, I mean, plan early. And to your point, can you get the big pharma's attention? Yes and no. I think it depends on the disease area in. And if you had a scientific target with novelty, maybe they will just be curious. So that's a part of the first part of you to engage with them in partnering meetings is actually showing that you have a differentiated approach to this. That will create the willingness to talk to you. I think anything like I'm doing the same thing but was done 10 years ago, similar to everything else, is not differentiated. You're not going to get their attention. It's a tough world out there. So that's a way to get engagement. But then I also believe there are a lot of professionals who have ex-pharma experience. I think you need to get hold of those experts out there and consultants and engage them, have the conversations, get their help to partly design your programs going forward. So you're building a product that's right for licensing, not a product that you think is great. I'm being blunt here. I think you need to really put yourself and get that advice from a customer perspective to make sure you're building it. But great if you can engage pharma, but also think about getting hold of people who have the experience who can give you that advice.
Well, you can feel free to provide some of that concrete advice. I'm actually going to relay a few questions from the audience because I think they are frankly better than mine. So does it help to generate a lot of exploratory outcome data from trials to try and maximize their output? Is that type of data valuable in your assessment? What do you think, Tara?
I'm not sure what you mean by exploratory. Do you mean like single-arm clinical trials?
I wish I could speak for one person who asked.
I think it's good for internal purposes to run some single-arm, and in some indications, there are ways to run that. But you want to have ideally double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial, if possible, because I think you're just losing time and patent exclusivity if you run a lot of trials that can't be used to move on in the development process. So
don't create data for data's own sake. What do you think about that, Anna?
Absolutely, I think, which will, as Tara says, to extend and kind of extend the life of the clinical development. But what I want to add is if you have got a good design, if you meant exploratory is kind of maximize the data that you can measure out of a study in terms of having the samples, measuring biomarkers, as mentioned, towards personalized healthcare. Proof of mechanism in a trial, not just the endpoint, the disease endpoint. If you can create that additional data that really explains the science behind why you got that efficacy readout, that I think, if you think that is exploratory, that I think is very supportive. But be careful on not doing trials just to collect, or in multiple diseases, I'll try lots of them, but I think you need to strategically pick the key disease your drug will work on, focus on that, a proper trial, and get as much data out of it.
That's great advice. I see time is really running out, so I'm going to end with one final question, and that's also on the practical side. Get big pharma's attention, connect with them early, and so on. So to get connected with you guys, what can a company here that's interested in partnering do, apart from hitting you up next to the coffee machine in the break?
Well, Ferring and myself and my colleagues were at many of the therapeutic area conferences, scientific conferences, commercial conferences, and also partnering meetings. I think we also have a link on our website where we can be reached.
Great. Anu?
Yeah, I think it is tough. I mean, it depends on the disease area. If you're in oncology, it is probably the toughest, because knowing my colleagues in other pharma, they're receiving thousands of requests in each of these partnering stuff. So it's important, I think, when I was thinking back on my time in biotech, recognize who are the key customers you have, and then focus on them from a longer perspective. So you need to reach out them in partnering meetings, scientific presentations at scientific meetings, making sure your scientists go out and connect. That's also a way to get engagement. So the more you can get engagement in the companies that are focused, I mean, there's not a lot of big pharma, so you can be focused and recognize who are the right ones for you. You need to really shape up how you communicate with them and make sure the content and the approach is good.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for the advice. There were a few more questions here, but I would advise you to catch these guys in the break then, the upcoming break, and ask them yourselves. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to leave the word to Michael.
Thank you, Jonas. Well, it's always interesting to hear the big pharma perspective. By the way, we still have a couple of presenters to go, just so you don't escape right away. All right. Yeah, it's always good to hear the big pharma perspective. But back to the company presentations now. I'd like to welcome to the stage Klaus Ellsborg Olsen, CEO of Initiator Pharma. Welcome, Klaus.
Thank you very much. Well, it's nice to hear the perspective from big pharma, and I hope that some of the data I will show you now is what they're looking for. So the usual disclaimer. So Initiator Pharma is a clinical stage pharma company, and we're dedicated to developing drugs for patients in need. And actually, you can say we have added on to that, because now we also have proved that it actually works in the clinic. And that's a big step for a small company. It's not a preclinical study anymore. It's not something we have shown in animal models. It's actually something we have shown in patients. And this is a really big step for Initiator, and we are super happy about the results that I will show you some highlights of here today. We are a Danish company. We are listed on First North. We have good funding running into 2025. And the current market cap is about 500 million. We have raised about 200 million. So we are looking good from the perspective of as a company. We have Link and Adrigo as cornerstone investors, in addition to 4,000 retail shareholders. Our pipeline consists of multiple drug candidates. And today I will focus on pudafensine, what is previously called IP 2015, and we'll look also into IP 2018. These are molecules that binds to a transporter, a reuptake transporter of monoamines in the brain. So you can say, what is the difference? Well, as you can see here under the profile, I've actually listed that they have a preference for some of the transporters. So there's many transporters molecules out there, but they all have unique profiles. 2015 is very unique, and we have also shown that in the clinic from a safety point of view. Pudafensine we are using in two indications that we have demonstrated so far in the clinic. That's ED, organic erectile dysfunction. We have positive phase 2b data. We have also shown in a healthy volunteer study that we actually have good pain relief with this drug candidate. And we have recently announced that in preclinical models, we have actually shown that this compound will also work in what we call female sexual dysfunction, or FSD. This is not shown in the clinic, but of course we're looking forward to see if we can combine the sexual relief function that we see in men and also have a product for women here. IP 2018 is what we have also generated phase 2A data on. That came earlier this summer, and that was in a phase 2A study in psychogenic ED. So this is patients with low mood or mild depressions and also suffering from erectile dysfunctions. So why is its modulation of monoamines so relevant? Well, as I said, the monoamines, which are dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, are really important neurotransmitter molecules. They are involved in a number of processes, such as emotion, arousal, mood, locomotor function, and also in specific types of memory. It's a validated target, so going after the monoamines and modulating the monoamines is something that's been done for many years for treatment of pain, depression, and Parkinson's disease. However, often when you start treating with these molecules that have been developed so far has had too much effect of one thing. So they created side effects. Too much serotonin gives you sexual dysfunctions. And this we see in people being treated for depression. We actually see that a lot of these patients actually, while they're taking antidepressive, experience sexual dysfunctions. So what we are doing in Initiator Pharma is developing a second generation of reuptake transporter modulators with a profile that is giving us relief, but not the side effects. And actually the molecules that we have developed, the guy who made the chemistry is actually in the audience today, Dan Peters, who's sitting here. So he knows everything about these molecules, and ask him if any other molecules will do the same thing. And the answer will be no. These are unique molecules. So as I talked a lot about erectile dysfunction, we see that more than 400 million men will suffer from this. We also see what we are focused on is not treating the patients that already have a treatment. We are looking for the non-responders, so the patients do not tolerate it. And if we look at the segment of patients that do not respond or cannot tolerate it, it's up to 35% of all ED patients. And if you look in the segment of where Novo is treating patients, in diabetic patients, up to 50% do not respond to the current therapy. So maybe we have a potential buyer here in the audience today. But we're also looking at what can we do today? The only treatments today are injectables, where you inject albuterol directly into the penile tissue, and you get an erection that's independent of stimulation. And patients do not prefer this, so we want to have a drug that stimulates the natural erection response. And this is exactly what we have. Really briefly, why do we have two drug candidates? Well, because the profile of erectile dysfunction is different. One is what we call organic. That is what happens to us men when we turn 40 and older. We get physically impaired to have an erection. The psychogenic has other causes: stress, performance anxiety, medication-induced, and so on. And this can also happen to young men. So we need two drugs because there's two very different backgrounds we're looking at. So looking at the erection response, what's actually driving that? That is dopamine. So when we see something nice, we're being touched, we remember something nice, we have a massive release of dopamine in the brain. Something good is going to happen. This dopamine is translated into the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide leads to the dilation of the arteries in the penile tissue, and thereby increasing blood flows into the penile tissue. So our drug works up here in the brain, so we have a central effect. We have also seen in the preclinical models that we also have a peripheral effect. So you can say the compound is dual acting in that way. The current compounds on the market, including Viagra and Cialis, are only peripheral, so they can only extend a natural occurring erection. We can initiate one. Looking into the brain, again here, just a picture showing with the cross here, the reuptake transporter. So when you block that with our compounds, upon the release of dopamine into the cleft, you increase the amount of dopamine and the time it's there. So thereby getting a stronger signal. Again, strengthening the natural erection response. Both pudafensine and IP 2018 are strengthening the natural erection response. What IP 2018 is doing in addition, it's also increasing the serotonin levels to some degree, helping the people with low mood and mild depression. So in a fine and balanced way. So just getting into the recent program we read out, that's an organic ED. This is a phase 2A. It's a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study, so everything is done to pharma specs here. 130 patients in. They come in for 4 visits, and we do assessments after each of the dosings. Here, of course, it's still a phase 2, so we still look at safety and tolerability. And then we actually use the endpoint, the EEIF score, which is the pivotal endpoint for registration this drug later. So this is not a pseudo endpoint. This is actually an endpoint that the regulatory authorities has validated and has been used to approve other drugs in this space. So what we are doing here, we come up with these results, and we met the primary endpoint. We see statistically significant on related improvements in intercourse setting compared to placebo, both and also to the baseline, and the results were consistent throughout the study. We also see that some of the other measurements, you can say the secondary readouts of the table, we actually also see significant improvements compared to baseline. So baseline meaning here to their own response of the patient, what they had when they got into the trial. And what is really important, we also saw that the compounds were safe to administrate. So at the low dose, we actually saw that the side effects were similar to placebo. So we didn't see anything, of severity in the clinical trial. And at the low dose where we saw the efficacy, we also see that the compound is safe to administrate. And this is really important because we are not trying to cure cancer, we are trying to cure sexual dysfunction. And therefore, it has to be a safe drug because we don't save life this way, but it needs to be very safe for the patients to use. So just going into the other studies on IP 2018, this is the one that read out earlier this year in the summer in psychogenic ED. This is a phase 2A, so there was only 24 patients into this. This is a 3-way crossover, again a randomized double placebo-controlled study. And here we used, instead of using the EIF end score, we used a Retiscan. A Retiscan is an apparatus, as you can see, we can mount on the penis of the patients going into this study. And then upon getting the drug and seeing an erotic movie, we measure if they get an erection or not. This, of course, is a highly artificial setting. So you can say, as I mentioned, in ED, in psychogenic ED, stress and anxiety is not a good way to have an erection. And these patients, some of them are actually feeling uncomfortable. They need to go into a dark room and they need to watch an erotic movie. But again, in this study, we actually see that we get statistically significant effects. So we see at the high dose of IP 2018, we see that we get an increase in the penile tumescence. We also see at the high dose, we see an increase in duration of rigidity. And these are two key parameters for having an intercourse. And again, the safety profile was very fine with this compound. And we are very excited about this. We are doing the post-hoc analysis of both trials now, and we'll come back to the market when we have those completed. So what about Initiator? Why invest in us? We have clinical relevant, statistically significant proof of concept data with our 2 drug candidates. We have limited competition. We are targeting significant unmet medical needs in commercial attractive positions. I saw the number of patients I showed you in the beginning. We are a very cost-efficient organization, so we have money to continue doing the business development that we are set out to do with these results. And the management is actually still very much incentivized by having a good portion of the ownership in the company. And in addition, I said, remember, now we just looked at men until this so far with these compounds. Now we also have evidence showing that both pudafensine and IP 2018 can be used in FSD. If you look at SSDD, so hypoactive sexual desire disorder in women, anyone who wants to guess how many women are suffering from this? 1 out of 10. So this is a huge market. So if we can also show that this compound can work in here, we will actually have a compound that will actually both being developed for both women and men and providing relief with their sexual function. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Klaus. Well, it's good you mentioned that you're also going into female sexual dysfunction as well, because I think a big question here is, what does the market look like there?
Yeah, so I said 1 out of 10 women is suffering from HSDD. If you look, we split the women into 2 groups, pre and post-menopausal. Mm-hmm. If you look in the post-menopausal, there's nothing approved therapy for these women today. So it's a huge unmet medical need. Mm-hmm. If you look in the there's premenopausal women, there's 2 products approved, but they are selling for peanuts. They are products with severe side effects. One of them is an injectable, and the other one you have to take every day. Mm-hmm. And the way we are envisioning using pudafensine or IP 2018 is an on-demand oral tablet. So the women are in control of their own sexuality. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just looking at the more general aspects of the brain, I mean, when you're trying to regulate monoamines in this case, there's always a risk of disrupting the balance there with the neurotransmitters. So how do you get around this issue?
Well, I can say we thought long about this when we started, but sometimes you also get a little bit lucky with the compounds. So the group of compounds that Daniel developed originally was actually one of the interesting part was that they were looking different from the other reuptake transporters. They did not have a drop in blood pressure as we often see these. They often, some of the other compounds often induce, increased locomotive functions in animal models. We do not see that either. So you can say these things are demonstrating that the compounds have a very specific effect, but they also have a good effect on dopamine, where previous compounds have been very much focused on serotonin and also norepinephrine. So that is giving us a unique profile. Of course, we have additional safety data around this compound, and looking from the clinical trials, you can see that the onset is not imminent. So when you take the compound, it takes some time before it comes in, but it's not such a big problem because the duration activity is in the blood for a long time. Yeah. So it will have a long half-life. So that way you can say that a lot of the compounds that give these side effects are compounds that is reuptaking fast into the system and give an immediate kick, you could say.
Yeah. Well, going to the chat questions here. How do you see the competitive landscape? The area has been stagnant in the last decades, according to this person. However, there are some Scandinavian companies now in development in ED.
Yeah, it has been a stagnating market, primarily due to Viagra and Cialis is generic, so the prices had dropped significantly. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are focused on the patients that do not respond or who cannot tolerate. So we believe here we can obtain premium pricing at minimum comparable to the prices that Viagra and Cialis had when they were on patent. So that's the first thing. You can say that otherwise there's not been generated any new compounds. We don't see anything in the pipeline. I didn't mention it during the presentation, but we did not invent targeting dopamine for erection. Actually, Pfizer tried to do that back in the day. The problem was that when they tried to modulate the dopamine, they also got a lot of nausea due to the profile of their compound. We can increase the dopamine levels without getting nausea. As you can say, so we are building on the validated trials that they did, but now we have a safe compound. So we don't see a lot of competition just for the non-responders and the non-tolerators. Yeah. So there you can say we are unique. We also know there's a few Scandinavian companies moving up, and it'll be exciting to see when they go into the clinic and start showing safety, which is really important in this space, and also of efficacy as the next step, of course.
Yeah. Well, actually, I see the timer there is expiring, so I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, next up we have Ton Berken, CBO for Ultimovacs. Welcome, Ton.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Let's see. Good. My name is Ton Berken. I'm the Chief Business Officer at Ultimovacs. You may have heard about the company. Ultimovacs is a listed company, therefore the disclaimer. Developing a cancer vaccine called UV1 with a company, 26 people, based in Oslo. One part of the organization, research organization, is based in Uppsala. What we are developing is a universal off-the-shelf cancer vaccine that is, as you will see in the presentation, combined with a number of checkpoint inhibitors, basically the standard of care in advanced cancer treatment, in a number of indications. UV1 is targeting the hallmark of cancer, called in our case telomerase. Telomerase is an enzyme expressed in 85 to 90% of all cancer patients, and our peptides are specially developed to, of course, recognize telomerase on the cancer surface. We have shown, I'm just returning from Madrid together with my colleagues from ESMO, we have shown as the second cancer vaccine company in the world to show positive randomized clinical phase 2 data. You may have seen the data last year presented by Merck and Moderna on their mRNA vaccine in melanoma, which of course was also very enthusiastically received by us. because cancer vaccines, of course, have a history to be not very effective, at least not in the clinic. We have now shown, together with Merck Moderna, a cancer vaccine treatment that actually works in clinical trials. Their vaccine is focused on individual patients. We have a universal cancer vaccine. I will touch upon that, of course. And since our program is relatively broad, we have 5 phase 2 clinical trials ongoing. We believe that we have a number of value inflection points coming up, hopefully very enthusiastic. This is the overview of the clinical pipeline. At the lower part of the slide, you see 2 phase 1 clinical trials. The 103 trial, where we combine UV1 with pembrolizumab, is a study that we are reporting on a very frequent basis. That study is a melanoma study where we have seen so far very good overall survival in patients that are in the metastatic disease area. Then you have a number of phase 2 trials. The top one is the pleural mesothelioma trial. That's the trial we reported on in Madrid on clinical efficacy. I will touch upon that in much more detail. And we have a number of additional clinical trials upcoming: melanoma, head and neck cancer, ovarian cancer, and non-small cell lung cancer. And these studies, as you can see, are primarily investigator-initiated studies. The Initium trial, the melanoma trial, is a sponsored trial, and in several of these studies, we have collaborations with big pharma like BMS and AstraZeneca. Hallmark of cancer, I already touched upon that. Telomerase is expressed in 85 to 90% of all cancer patients, so that means that basically using UV1 in cancer patient populations is very broad, and therefore the potential applicability of UV1 is very broad. It is important to understand that telomerase is universal. As I mentioned, high percentage of cancer types are expressing telomerase. It is essential. If telomerase wasn't there, the cancer cell would not have an opportunity to grow, so it would die. And it's enduring, which is quite important, that over the span of the cancer lifetime, you can say, telomerase will be active, which also means that UV1 can be applicable from very early stage of disease to metastatic disease. Here, the 5 studies that we're doing with all the details. I will not dwell into too much on that. 3 of our studies are fully enrolled: the mesothelioma study, obviously, the melanoma study, and the head and neck cancer study. We, of course, are reporting on these studies. We have now reported top-line results on the mesothelioma study in the first half of this year, and we followed up on reporting on overall survival a couple of days ago. The Initium trial, we expect to report on in the first half of next year, and head and neck cancer will follow in the second half of next year. The other 2 studies will read out later. Here you can see a bit of background on malignant mesothelioma. It's a small indication, orphan drug. We have received recently orphan drug disease designation for the study from the FDA. As you can see, the rate per 100,000 is of course relatively small, hence the orphan drug disease indication. Overall survival in, for instance, this 5-year overall survival in distant patients is approximately 7%. This is a highly aggressive type of cancer in the lining of the lung. It's primarily developed in men. I think there's a fair correlation here that people exposed to asbestos have a high incidence of obtaining this type of cancer. As you can see, the incidence trends in the various geographies is relatively stable. Maybe surprisingly, you see the US below maybe of some of the other geographies. Actually, the overall incidence outside of the US is higher, but of course, after, for instance, an event like 9/11, Also, people who are being exposed extensively to asbestos may, of course, have or will obtain, unfortunately, this aggressive cancer type. The current treatment options, primarily chemotherapy and Ipi/Nivo checkpoint inhibitor, CTLA-4 and PD-1 combination in first line. Second line, there are no treatment options. And as you will see, we are combining UV1 with Ipi/Nivo in a second line treatment. Ipi/Nivo did have a second line indication, but they moved up the ladder, you can say, in 2020 and 2021 when they obtained the first line treatment. This is the design of the study, a two-arm study design, totally 118 patients randomized. One experimental arm, of course, with UV1 included, and one control arm, Ipi/Nivo. The eligible number of patients, inoperable, you can say that when people move into an advanced setting, which is very rapidly happening in mesothelioma, basically operation is no option. It's a very complicated cancer type as well. The study is done in a number of countries, in Scandinavia primarily, Spain and Australia. This is the data that we have shown a couple of days ago, which we are obviously very proud on. On overall survival, we have a rate of 31%, almost doubling the OR of Ipi/Nivo on its own. And the overall survival, you can see, we basically will have a 27% advance over Ipi/Nivo in this particular trial. You can see the Kaplan-Meier curve showing that quite nicely. The follow-up time is at the moment 17.1 months. Obviously, we want to see the data maturing even more, so we can maybe see the widening of the curves on this graph. A number of additional studies, the Initiator trial, our melanoma trial. This is a study in first-line melanoma where we use the same combination of Ipi/Nivo. It's a larger trial, 156 patients in a number of countries, also including the US. And this study, as I mentioned, is fully enrolled, and we hope to report, hopefully similar, at least positive data on this trial in the first half of next year. The FOCUS trial, metastatic head and neck cancer, combination with pembrolizumab. Maybe I should have said it earlier. UV1 as such is agnostic to any kind of checkpoint inhibitor. So we're combining with basically 5 out of the 6 marketed checkpoint inhibitors in the world. So head and neck cancer sponsored by a German university hospital, 75 patients randomized in this trial, also a 2-arm study, 50 in the UV1 arm and 25 with pembro. Expected top-line results in the second half of 2024. DOVAC study, a somewhat more complex study. Ovarian cancer is a type of cancer which is primarily treated with PARP inhibitors and small molecule TKI. We are combining with olaparib, AstraZeneca's TKI, and durvalumab, their PD-L1, in randomized clinical trials where we have an arm of olaparib, an arm of olaparib and durvalumab, which is a treatment option, and where we add UV1 in the experimental arm. Study results also expected in the second half of 2024, subject, of course, to patient enrollment, because this study is, together with the next study, not fully enrolled yet. LUNGVAC, advanced non-small cell lung cancer, a study ongoing in Norway primarily, initially done with pembrolizumab, but since the reimbursement system in Norway changed, we moved to cemiplimab, the PD-1 of Regeneron. This study is ongoing, recently started, you can say. Again here, similar kind of study design. UV1 with sibeprenlimab, arrow on the slide, in one arm, and sibeprenlimab in one arm on its own. Primary endpoints in all of our studies has been PFS, so progression-free survival, and secondary endpoints OS and ORR. Going back to one of the phase 1 studies I mentioned in the beginning, we combined in the past, and that study is still in following up, patients where we combine UV1 with pembrolizumab. And as you can see from this spider plot, you can see a lot of patients are keeping on a very low progression. Well, no progression rates, they are basically staying healthy. So we had a complete response rate in this study of 33% and an overall response rate of 57%. And we see basically that response rate continuing over the weeks that you can see here on the axis. What we thought was very interesting here to see as well, as you can imagine, PD1s and PD-L1s will respond very well in PD1 high patients. In PD1 low patients, they do not respond that well. And as you can see that our complete responses in PDL negative or low patients is 36%, you can definitely see there's a strong advance in the trial of using UV1 in this combination setting to patients. UV1, as I mentioned, off-the-shelf, easy-to-use vaccine. The treatment regimen is 8 intradermal injections, 4 in the first 10 days, subject to which CPI we are using. There is no need for pre-screening, so basically patients that are eligible for treatment with an CPI can also add UV1 to the regimen. It's a low-cost production. These are synthetic peptides. We have a commercial scale manufacturing in place, so we are definitely ready for getting this as a commercial drug product. And of course, when we are moving to phase 3 clinical trials, we need to have that in place. Simple logistics, the product has a 3-year shelf life. It's simple on-site preparation, so there's no need for a very complicated hospital environment. Basically, people get the injections prior to getting the CPI injections. A couple of milestones. I already mentioned the NIPU trial, the mesothelioma trial, where we had a couple of reportings this year and last week at ESMO in Madrid. Obviously, we're very keen to see the phase 2 trial on Initium in the beginning of next year in this study, which is sponsored by Ultimovacs. And then, as I mentioned already later on, the FOCUS trial, the head and neck cancer trial, as well as the DOVAC trial, the ovarian cancer trial, will read out next year, and we hope to report on those as well. This is a quick view on the companies, our investors. So key takeaways, broad phase 2 development program for a company of 26 people. I think that's quite impressive. Proof of concept now with the NIPU data. The people, both scientific people as well as the BD people we spoke at ESMO, were quite impressed by the data they have seen compared to an PD-1 CTLA-4 treatment, which is very well established in the market. We have seen good safety profile. Basically, in all our trials, we have not seen any additional safety issues with using UV1 in combinations with the CPI. The only thing that we see, which is quite common with the use of vaccine treatments, is injection site reactions. It's an off-the-shelf product, as I mentioned. We have external validation through a number of fast-track designations and orphan drug designations from the FDA and EMA. We have an experienced team, and hopefully, of course, we look forward to see more exciting upcoming news in the month, let's say 12 months from now. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tom. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I know that we have a break upcoming now.
That's fine.
If anybody has questions for you, I'm sure they will be able to ask you during the break.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
But thank you so much again for coming and giving the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.